Keanu Reeves, while picking up daily essentials at a local value mart, witnesses a heartbreaking commotion at one of the checkouts. Daniel Evans, a desperate single father trying to care for his daughter Lily, is being publicly humiliated by a ruthless cashier and a dismissive, cunning manager, Mr. Albright, over the few items he bought with his last pennies. The fear in little Lily's eyes, the crushing of her father's dignity. As Keanu silently watches everything with sharp attention, he feels that this situation is not just a simple disagreement, but a much deeper, rotten injustice. And what he is about to do will be an intervention so powerful it will not only change the fate of that innocent family, but of an entire exploited neighborhood, and it will bring tears to your eyes. Before we begin this striking quest for justice, please share with us in the comments where you're watching from. And if you love powerful, real-life inspired stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. On the east side of Los Angeles, where the sun struggled to find its way between the buildings in a modest, working-class neighborhood, the Value Mart supermarket was, as usual that afternoon, crowded. People were doing their weekly shopping, children were whining, clinging to their mothers' skirts, and cashiers were monotonously scanning products. Amidst this ordinariness, a figure, doing his best to go unrecognized in a dark, hooded sweatshirt, a baseball cap shadowing his face, and dark sunglasses, was quietly navigating the aisles between milk and coffee. Keanu Reeves. Keanu had just emerged from an intense film shoot and had allocated a few days to himself to rest his mind and soul. Tired of the artificiality of luxury hotels and ostentatious restaurants, he often enjoyed wandering through such neighborhoods to feel the real texture of the city, to witness the daily hustle of ordinary people. This was a kind of grounding for him, a ritual of connecting with reality. Today, too, he had entered this market simply to pick up a few basic necessities. He had tossed a packet of organic tea, some fresh fruit, and a box of oatmeal into his basket. His eyes were observing the people around him, their facial expressions, their body language. As an actor, he had always possessed a keen ability to observe the finest details of human nature. But that day, as he headed towards Value Mart's checkouts, he was yet unaware of what kind of human drama he was about to witness. Was this seemingly ordinary shopping trip to be the beginning of an unexpected mission for him? And where would that familiar sense of justice in his heart drag him this time? At one of the checkouts, a queue slightly longer than the others had formed. Grumbles and impatient sighs could be heard. Keanu curiously looked in that direction. At the very front of the queue stood a man who appeared to be in his late 30s, tired but neatly dressed. This was Daniel Evans. Beside him, his little daughter Lily, about 7 or 8 years old, with wheat-colored skin and huge brown eyes, looked around anxiously. Lily was clinging tightly to her father's trouser leg. On the counter in front of Daniel lay a few basic food items and a small packet of colorful candies. Daniel was counting the crumpled few dollars in his hand and the coins in his palm with trembling fingers, the expression of helplessness and shame on his face deepening progressively. The cashier, a young man in his 20s with the store's red-logoed vest, named Kevin according to his name tag, was chewing gum insolently and speaking to Daniel with an impatient and derogatory tone. "Sir, how much longer are we going to wait? There's a line behind you, can't you see? If you don't have enough money, you'll have to leave some things. This isn't a charity." Daniel's cheeks flushed. "I'm sorry," he stammered. It just seems I'm a few cents short. Perhaps we can leave the candies." His voice was choked with shame. Little Lily, upon hearing her father's words, lowered her eyes, her lips beginning to tremble. It was evident how much she wanted those candies, but it was as if she also sensed her father's helplessness at that moment. Who cared about the storm raging in this little girl's heart? Just then, Mr. Marcus Albright, Value Mart's manager, a man in his 40s with a shiny suit, his hair slicked back with gel and a sycophantic smile on his face, emerged from his office just behind the checkouts and intervened in the situation. However, this intervention was of a kind that would worsen the situation rather than fix it. "Is there a problem, Kevin?" asked Mr. Albright, his voice coated with an oily politeness, but his eyes holding a cold calculation. He scanned Daniel and the few items on the counter with a disdainful look. "Ah, is it you again, Mr. Evans? I suppose you've overshot your budget again." These words were like a slap in the face for Daniel. So, this wasn't the first time. This market, this manager, apparently knew people like Daniel who were in dire straits and did not hesitate to display this derogatory attitude towards them. Keanu frowned. This didn't seem like simple cashier rudeness. This looked like something more organized, more ruthless. What kind of darkness lay behind Mr. Albright's sly smile? And what other injustices were these market walls witnessing? Little Lily clung even tighter to her father's leg, tears beginning to stream from her eyes. Daniel, seeing his daughter cry, helplessly hugged her. "It's okay, sweetie, don't cry," he whispered. "The candy isn't that important." But his voice couldn't hide his own helplessness and shame. Keanu Reeves watched all of this from a few steps back, silently and with sharp attention. His face remained hidden in the shadow of his cap and sunglasses, but the slight clenching of his jaw was a precursor to the storm brewing within him. This scene had reminded him of something, perhaps from his own past, or perhaps other injustices he had witnessed. But whatever the reason, something had stirred within him. This wasn't just an ordinary incident in a market. This was a tableau where human dignity was being trampled, where helplessness was being exploited. And Keanu felt he could no longer remain a mere spectator to this tableau. But how should he intervene? Could he rectify this situation without revealing his identity, merely as a citizen? Or would he have to take a more radical step to expose this dirty game entirely? These questions raced through his mind at lightning speed. Mr. Albright, likely interpreting Daniel's silence as weakness, continued in an even louder voice. "Look, Mr. Evans, this is a business establishment. If you cannot pay for what you've taken, you'll have to leave those items on the counter. Or perhaps we could provide you with a special payment facility. What do you say?" As he said this last sentence, that oily, insinuating smile reappeared on his face. Of course, this facility will also have certain conditions of its own. These words were the last straw for Keanu. This man was not only humiliating, but also trying to take advantage of a desperate man's situation, perhaps trying to drag him into a larger debt trap. This was unacceptable. Keanu slowly put his basket on the floor. He pushed back the hood of his sweatshirt slightly, took off his sunglasses, and walked calmly towards the checkout. His steps were neither hurried nor hesitant, just determined and measured. At that moment, all the hum in the market ceased, and everyone's attention turned to this mysterious man. It was clear that something was about to happen. But what? No one could guess. Keanu stopped right beside Mr. Albright and Daniel Evans. He was taller than both of them, and the natural nobility in his posture immediately cast a different aura around him. First, he looked at little Lily, who had buried her tear-streaked face in her father's side. A tender, heartfelt smile appeared on his face. Then he turned his gaze to Daniel, who stood there, not knowing what to do out of shame and helplessness. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low but extremely clear. "Is there a problem, perhaps?" Mr. Albright was startled by this unexpected intervention. He scanned Keanu from head to toe, those simple clothes, that unfamiliar face. Who was this now? "I don't think this concerns you, sir," he said, his voice insolent. "Please wait your turn." Keanu ignored Mr. Albright's rude words. He turned to Daniel again. "Sir," he said, the respect and kindness in his voice surprising Daniel. "If I'm not mistaken, it seems a small amount is missing. If you'll allow me, I'd like to cover that difference. And please, let's take back the little lady's candies. No child should be upset over something like this." These words had the effect of a bomb in the market. Cashier Kevin's jaw dropped. The sly smile on Mr. Albright's face froze, replaced by an expression of astonishment mixed with anger. Daniel Evans, on the other hand, couldn't believe what he was hearing. Was this stranger offering to help him and his daughter, and without expecting anything in return? "And who might you be?" Mr. Albright asked, his voice harsher this time. "What right do you have to interfere in our business?" Keanu slowly turned to Mr. Albright. There was an expression in his eyes, steely, that no one had seen before. I, he said, his voice calm but equally determined, am someone who cannot remain silent in the face of injustice and bullying, Mr. Albright. And I believe there are some things I need to learn about your way of doing business. At that moment, Keanu Reeves was no longer just a customer, just a witness. He was part of a mission, and this mission would not only rectify a small injustice in that market, but perhaps also ignite the fuse of a much larger change. The cold aisles of the market were now staged to an even more tense anticipation. Keanu Reeves's calm yet steely words, echoing in the checkout area of Value Mart, caused Mr. Marcus Albright's face to contort with rage. Who was this ordinary-looking man, this nobody, daring to challenge his authority and his way of doing business? This was a situation Albright was unaccustomed to. He was used to easily intimidating and manipulating people. But this man before him possessed a determination, a resilience he had never encountered before. "Look, sir," Albright said, forcing a semblance of calm into his voice, though his eyes couldn't hide his anger. "This is my store, and I make the rules here. I also decide how we treat our customers. Your understanding of justice doesn't seem to align with my commercial interests." He smirked condescendingly. "If you want to play the hero, please do it elsewhere. Now, if you'll excuse me," he said, attempting to step towards Daniel Evans. But Keanu didn't move an inch. If anything, his posture became even more upright. "Your commercial interests," Keanu repeated, a subtle irony in his voice. "Is taking advantage of people's desperation, making a small child cry for a packet of candy, part of your commercial interests, Mr. Albright?" This direct accusation was enough to make Albright lose his composure. "Who do you think you are, talking to me like that?" he shouted, his polished professional mask shattering completely. "Security! Security! Get this man out of here!" Cashier Kevin, a mixture of fear and excitement on his face, was about to jump from his seat when a murmur rose among the customers in line. Some recoiled in fear, while others watched this unexpected drama with avid curiosity. Just then, from the back of the queue, a trembling but clear voice was heard. "Oh my God! Is that Keanu Reeves?" This whisper spread through the entire market in an instant. All eyes locked onto the man standing calmly but resolutely opposite Albright. Keanu slowly removed his baseball cap, then his sunglasses. And at that moment, the face beneath that ordinary hooded sweatshirt was illuminated by the store's fluorescent lights. That familiar, melancholic, yet charismatic face, known to the entire world. Yes, it was indeed Keanu Reeves. Mr. Marcus Albright froze as if struck by ice when he realized the man standing before him was Keanu Reeves. His jaw dropped, his eyes widened in disbelief. The man he had just yelled at, tried to have thrown out, was one of Hollywood's biggest stars. At that moment, time seemed to stop for Albright. All his self-confidence, his arrogant demeanor, evaporated in an instant, replaced by pure terror and panic. He didn't know what to do, what to say. Cashier Kevin, too, was frozen in place. The sarcastic expression on his face had been wiped clean, replaced by a look of astonishment, mixed with awe-struck stupidity. The people he had just scorned and humiliated were now being defended by a Hollywood star. Daniel Evans and little Lily, on the other hand, watched the unfolding events in bewilderment. They couldn't believe that this kind stranger was the famous actor Keanu Reeves. Lily had forgotten her fear, staring at Keanu with wide, adoring eyes. It was as if she were in a movie scene. Keanu, ignoring the astonished looks and whispers around him, turned back to Mr. Albright. His voice was still calm, but this time it carried a weight, a seriousness. "Yes, Mr. Albright," he said. "It's me. And now, I believe we can discuss your commercial interests and your understanding of customer satisfaction in a little more detail." "What do you say?" Albright stammered, trying to say something, but his voice failed him. He swallowed hard. Beads of sweat were trickling down his forehead. At that moment, he was aware that he was experiencing one of the most difficult moments of his career. The man standing opposite him was not just a Hollywood star, but also a name loved and respected by the whole world, known for his integrity and humility. And he had made a huge mistake against this name. The events that had transpired at Value Mart's checkout, culminating in the revelation of Keanu Reeves' identity, had shifted the atmosphere dramatically. Manager Mr. Marcus Albright, moments before a figure of smug authority, now stood ashen-faced and visibly shaken. Cashier Kevin seemed to wish the earth would swallow him whole. The onlooking customers, a mix of shock and dawning excitement, buzzed with hushed whispers. Keanu, however, remained focused. His intention hadn't been to create a spectacle, but to address an injustice. "Mr. Albright," he said, his voice calm yet firm, "I believe an apology is owed to Mr. Evans and his daughter, Lily, for the rather public and unnecessary distress they were caused." Albright, jolted by Keanu's directness, turned hastily to Daniel. "Mr. Evans, I am profoundly sorry," he stammered, the words clumsy and insincere. "A complete misunderstanding, I assure you." Daniel, still trying to process that Keanu Reeves was championing his cause, managed a small, uncertain nod. Lily peeked at Keanu, a shy smile replacing her earlier tears. Keanu found this apology lacking, but decided to move forward. He turned to Kevin. "Now," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument, "if you would please ring up Mr. Evans' items again, including those candies he was forced to put back." He then took out his wallet. "And add them all to my bill." Both Daniel and Kevin stared, dumbfounded. "But, sir," Kevin began, "that's really not." "I believe I can decide what's necessary," Keanu interjected smoothly. He then addressed Daniel and Lily, his expression softening into genuine warmth. "In fact, I have a better idea. Mr. Evans, Lily, please, let's get a new shopping cart. And I want you to go through these aisles and fill it with everything you genuinely need, and anything else that might bring a little joy. Toys, books, your favorite treats. Don't give a thought to the cost. Today, everything is on me." Lily's eyes widened, then danced with an almost incredulous delight. She looked at her father, her unspoken question clear. Daniel was overwhelmed. "Mr. Reeves," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you don't have to do this. We manage." "I know you do," Keanu replied, placing a reassuring hand on Daniel's shoulder. "I can see you're a strong man, a good father. But sometimes, even the strongest among us can use a helping hand. And please, consider this not as charity, but as a gesture of goodwill. Please allow me." The sincerity in Keanu's voice, the kindness in his eyes, was undeniable. The tension in the store had transformed into something else entirely, a sense of wonder, of shared humanity. Other customers, many visibly moved, started to discreetly film the scene, not with intrusive intent, but as if to capture a rare, beautiful moment. Mr. Albright, meanwhile, had retreated to a corner, attempting to call someone on his phone, his face a mask of barely controlled panic. Keanu, Daniel, and an ecstatic Lily began their journey through the aisles of Value Mart. Lily, her earlier shyness forgotten, joyfully pointed at items, her laughter echoing lightly. Daniel, though still hesitant at first, gradually relaxed under Keanu's easygoing manner and Lily's infectious happiness. The cart quickly filled not just with necessities, fresh produce, quality proteins, pantry staples, but also with small indulgences, new shoes for Lily, a warm sweater for Daniel, and, of course, a generous selection of Lily's favorite colorful candies and a new storybook. Keanu listened patiently as Daniel, unburdened for a moment, spoke of his struggles as a single parent since his wife passed and his dreams for Lily's future. When they finally approached the checkout with their overflowing cart, Keanu ensured a different, more respectful cashier handled the transaction. As he paid the substantial bill, he turned to Daniel and Lily. "It was a pleasure shopping with you both," he said with a genuine smile. Daniel, his eyes glistening, struggled for words. "Mr. Reeves, I don't know how we can ever thank you. You've given us more than just groceries today. You've given us hope." Keanu simply nodded. "Take care of Lily, Daniel. And remember, there's still good in this world. He gave Lily a gentle wink. "And you, young lady, enjoy those candies and your new book, all right?" That day, for Daniel and Lily, was about much more than a free shopping trip. It was a day an unexpected guardian angel had touched their lives, restoring their faith in humanity and a father's dignity. As for Keanu Reeves, he hadn't just bought groceries. He had touched hearts, righted a small but significant wrong, and become the reason for a little girl's radiant smile. Yet, as he left Value Mart, a nagging suspicion lingered. Albright's unease, the talk of payment facilities. It felt like there was more to Value Mart's operations than just poor customer service. His mission, he sensed, might not be entirely over. Following his impactful encounter at Value Mart, Keanu Reeves couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Albright's predatory behavior towards Daniel Evans was not an isolated incident. The manager's slick offer of a payment facility and his visible panic when confronted echoed in Keanu's mind. This wasn't just about a rude cashier or a dismissive manager. There was a scent of something more systemic, more rotten at the core of Value Mart's operations. His innate sense of justice, often a quiet undercurrent in his life, was now fully stirred. The next day, Keanu, once again adopting his inconspicuous attire, began to subtly investigate the neighborhood around Value Mart. He spoke to locals in coffee shops, park benches, and small community centers, not as Keanu Reeves the celebrity, but as a concerned citizen trying to understand the community's challenges. He listened more than he spoke, piecing together a troubling narrative. Story after story emerged, painting a grim picture of Value Mart as a place that systematically exploited its most vulnerable customers. He heard about inflated prices on essential goods, the deliberate stocking of near-expiry products sold as bargains, and most alarmingly, repeated mentions of those special payment plans that seemed to trap people in a cycle of debt with exorbitant interest rates. His unease growing, Keanu reached out to Daniel Evans again. He wanted to understand more, to see if Daniel knew of other specific cases. Daniel, no longer just a grateful recipient of kindness, but now an empowered ally, was hesitant at first, fearing repercussions. But Keanu's quiet determination and genuine concern convinced him. Daniel introduced Keanu to Mrs. Gable, a frail but sharp-witted retiree in her 70s. She tearfully recounted how a small grocery bill, managed through one of Albright's payment plans, had ballooned into an unmanageable debt, with Value Mart representatives making threatening calls and visits. Then there was Maria Diaz, a young immigrant mother, who showed Keanu documents proving she was charged for items she never purchased, and how Albright had dismissed her complaints, even threatening to report her to immigration authorities if she made a fuss. Each testimony was a fresh stab of anger and resolve for Keanu. These weren't isolated incidents of poor business practice. This was calculated exploitation. He realized that merely paying for one family's groceries, however significant for them, wouldn't address the root cause. A larger, more systemic intervention was needed. His first call was to a trusted lawyer friend, outlining what he had discovered. The lawyer, initially skeptical, grew alarmed as Keanu detailed the consistent patterns of deception and intimidation. "Keanu, if what you're saying is true, and you have these testimonies, this is organized fraud, possibly even racketeering," the lawyer advised. "But you'll need irrefutable proof, something that directly links Albright, and potentially the higher echelons of Value Mart, if this is a chain-wide issue." The challenge was daunting. Albright was careful. The agreements were often vaguely worded, playing on the victim's desperation and lack of financial literacy. Keanu knew that confronting such a system required more than just goodwill. It needed strategy, evidence, and a team. He then thought of Kevin, the young cashier from Value Mart. Kevin had witnessed Albright's behavior firsthand and had shown a flicker of conscience during the initial confrontation. Could he be an ally? It was a long shot, but Keanu decided to try and reach out discreetly. Through a local community leader Daniel knew, a message was passed to Kevin. Days later, a nervous Kevin met Keanu in a quiet, out-of-the-way diner. Fearful for his job, but tormented by his conscience, Kevin confirmed Keanu's suspicions. He spoke of internal practices at Value Mart, deliberate mispricing, pressure from Albright to push near-expiry items, and hushed talks among senior staff about the special financing offered to problematic customers. Kevin even managed to discreetly copy a few internal memos that hinted at these unethical practices, though he couldn't access the core financial documents. "Albright keeps those locked up tight, Mr. Reeves," Kevin whispered. "He's smart, and he's ruthless." The information, while not a smoking gun, was enough to convince Keanu that his instincts were right. He now had first-hand accounts from victims and an insider's corroboration. His next step was to bring in professionals who could navigate the legal and public arenas. He thought of Ben Jacobs, an investigative journalist known for his tenacity and a portfolio of exposés on corporate greed. Jacobs, when contacted, jumped at the story, sensing its potential impact. Simultaneously, Keanu used his network to get a discreet consultation with Detective Eva Rostova, a veteran of the city's financial crimes unit, respected for her integrity and thoroughness. Presenting his findings anonymously at first, he gauged her interest. Rostova, intrigued by the pattern and the vulnerability of the victims, agreed to look into Value Mart, albeit unofficially until more concrete evidence surfaced. The quiet quest for justice was now a clandestine operation. Keanu, the unexpected catalyst, found himself coordinating a small, dedicated team. The mission had evolved from a simple act of kindness into a complex battle against a predatory system. The risks were significant, but for Keanu, the image of Lily Evans's tear-streaked face and the quiet despair in the eyes of Mrs. Gable and Maria Diaz was a far more compelling force than any personal apprehension. The fight for Value Mart's soul and the dignity of its community had truly begun. The plan that Keanu Reeves and his newly assembled team, Daniel Evans representing the victims, Kevin the guilt-ridden insider, Ben Jacobs the investigative journalist, and Detective Eva Rostova the legal backbone, devised was audacious. They aimed to expose Mr. Marcus Albright and the predatory practices of Value Mart, not in a courtroom shrouded in legal jargon, but in the court of public opinion, right within the walls of his own store, during its busiest hours. Detective Rostova, leveraging the initial evidence and testimonies, began building an official case, working towards securing the necessary warrants for a formal investigation. Ben Jacobs, meanwhile, readied his news crew, poised to broadcast the takedown, ensuring Albright couldn't manipulate the narrative later. Kevin played a dangerous game, providing crucial updates on Albright's movements and any unusual activities within the store, including the location of a secondary, less guarded office, where he suspected more incriminating documents were kept. Daniel Evans, alongside Mrs. Gable, Maria Diaz, and nearly a dozen other individuals who had suffered under Albright's schemes, steeled themselves to be present. Their courage, born of desperation and a newfound hope ignited by Keanu's support, was palpable. They would no longer be silent victims. On a bustling Friday evening, as Value Mart teemed with weekend shoppers, the plan was set in motion. Ben Jacobs and his unobtrusive camera operator mingled with the crowd, their equipment cleverly disguised. Detective Rostova's plainclothes officers were strategically positioned, both inside and outside the store. Keanu, in his now familiar understated attire, entered the store a few minutes after Daniel and the group of victims, who had dispersed to various aisles, appearing as ordinary shoppers. The signal was a pre-arranged phrase Daniel would use at the customer service desk, feigning an issue with a recent payment plan adjustment. As Daniel calmly but firmly began to question the bewildered clerk, Mr. Albright, ever the vigilant overseer of his domain, emerged from his office, a condescending smirk already forming on his lips as he approached Daniel. "Mr. Evans," Albright began, his voice dripping with false concern. "Are we having some trouble understanding the very generous terms of our community support program again?" Before Daniel could respond, Keanu stepped forward from a nearby aisle, his presence immediately commanding attention, despite his simple clothes. The hushed whispers started almost instantly as shoppers recognized him. "Mr. Albright," Keanu said, his voice quiet yet resonant, cutting through the store's ambient noise. "I believe the only thing difficult to understand here is how you've managed to conduct such generous business for so long." Albright, momentarily stunned by Keanu's sudden appearance and direct accusation, paled. "Reeves, what is the meaning of this? I thought we resolved our misunderstanding." "Our misunderstanding, Mr. Albright, was just the tip of the iceberg," Keanu stated, his gaze unwavering. At that moment, Ben Jacobs's camera focused, quantity on hand Albright, and Detective Rostova, accompanied by her officers, stepped forward. "Marcus Albright," Detective Rostova announced, her voice clear and authoritative. "You are under investigation for multiple counts of systematic fraud, predatory lending practices, and the intentional sale of expired and unsafe goods. We have a warrant to search these premises and your financial records." As Albright was read his rights, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning terror, the store erupted. Shoppers gasped, some pulled out their phones, and the group of victims, led by Daniel, watched with tears of vindication in their eyes. Kevin, the cashier, discreetly pointed Rostova's team towards the secondary office, where, as he suspected, a trove of falsified documents, illegal loan agreements, and records of intimidation tactics were swiftly uncovered. Ben Jacobs's live feed was already broadcasting the dramatic events. Keanu, however, melted back from the immediate spotlight, allowing the law and the victims to take center stage. He had initiated the momentum, brought the disparate pieces together, but he knew the true victory belonged to the community that had found the courage to speak out. As Albright was escorted out of Value Mart in handcuffs, his empire of deceit crumbling around him, a spontaneous cheer went up from the crowd of shoppers and victims. Daniel Evans, with Lily clutching his hand, approached Keanu, his eyes overflowing. We can never repay you, Mr. Reeves." Keanu placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You already have, Daniel," he said softly. "By standing up. By showing Lily what courage looks like." He looked around at the scene, the relief on the victims' faces, the buzz of the news crew, the dazed but ultimately compliant store staff. The fight wasn't entirely over. There would be legal battles ahead. But a significant wall of injustice had been breached. For Keanu, this was the true reward, witnessing the first powerful stirrings of a community, reclaiming its dignity and its voice. The takedown of Mr. Albright and the exposure of Value Mart's systemic exploitation sent shockwaves through the neighborhood and beyond. With Albright in custody, awaiting trial, and Value Mart's operations temporarily suspended by health and safety officials, the community began a slow, arduous process of healing and rebuilding. The grocery store, once a symbol of fear and deceit, now stood as a stark reminder of the community's resilience and the power of collective action when sparked by a single act of courage. The legal case against Albright was formidable. The combination of Kevin's insider information, the meticulously gathered contracts, the photographic evidence of expired goods, and the poignant testimonies from dozens of victims like Daniel Evans, Mrs. Gable, and Maria Diaz painted an undeniable picture of calculated, widespread fraud. The media coverage, led by Ben Jacobs' in-depth investigative reports, kept the story in the public eye, ensuring that pressure remained for a thorough prosecution. Albright faced a litany of charges, and his trial became a focal point for discussions on consumer rights and corporate responsibility towards vulnerable populations. Detective Eva Rostova, in a press conference, commended the bravery of the whistleblowers and victims. "This case highlights what can be achieved when ordinary citizens refuse to be silenced," she stated. "While Mr. Reeves's involvement brought initial attention, it was the courage of this community that truly brought Mr. Albright to justice." Keanu's next, equally important step was to ensure that the families victimized by Albright's schemes received tangible support and restitution. Working with Ben Jacobs and his initial lawyer contact, he connected the community with a reputable nonprofit organization specializing in consumer rights and financial advocacy. This organization swiftly filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of all known Value Mart victims, seeking not only compensation for their financial losses, but also damages for the emotional distress inflicted. Daniel Evans, having found his voice, became a key representative for the victims in this lawsuit, his quiet dignity and clear articulation of their plight resonating deeply. "We weren't just cheated out of money," he stated in a widely circulated interview. "We were robbed of our peace of mind, our trust. But thanks to people who cared, we're starting to reclaim that." Within months, an interim relief fund, established using assets seized from Albright's illicit gains, began dispersing aid to the most affected families. For many, like Mrs. Gable, who had been on the verge of losing her home, this meant a literal lifeline. Keanu, true to his nature, facilitated much of this from behind the scenes, ensuring the process was transparent, fair, and focused entirely on the needs of the victims. He also made a significant anonymous donation to the relief fund to bolster its resources. One of his quiet priorities was helping Daniel Evans find long-term stability. During their earlier conversations, Daniel had spoken of his background in community gardening and his passion for providing fresh, healthy food options, a stark contrast to what Value Mart had offered. Keanu, leveraging his connections, introduced Daniel to a local urban farming initiative that was looking for a community outreach coordinator. After an interview where Daniel's quiet passion and first-hand understanding of the community's needs shone through, he was offered the position. It was more than just a job. It was a role that allowed him to contribute positively, to help heal the very fabric of the neighborhood that had been so damaged. The transformation in Daniel was remarkable. With financial security and a meaningful new purpose, the lines of stress on his face softened. Lily, too, thrived, no longer carrying the unspoken anxieties of her father. The dark cloud that Value Mart had cast over their lives, and the lives of so many others, was finally beginning to lift. The store itself was eventually taken over by a local cooperative, committed to ethical practices and genuine community service. Keanu watched these developments from a distance, content. He had no desire for public accolades or to be hailed as a savior. For him, the real victory was in seeing a community find its strength, in witnessing individuals like Daniel reclaim their dignity and forge a new, hopeful path. He had merely opened a door, shone a light on an injustice. The courage to walk through that door, to fight for change, had come from the people themselves. As he drove through that neighborhood many months later, on his way to a different, unrelated commitment, he saw the park opposite the newly reopened co-op grocery store. Children were playing, families were picnicking, and a small farmer's market stall, managed by Daniel, was doing a brisk trade in fresh local produce. Lily was there, a little taller, a little more confident, helping her father with a bright smile. Keanu didn't stop. He simply observed for a moment, a quiet, almost imperceptible smile touching his own lips, before driving on. The ripples of one unexpected encounter, one decision to act, continued to spread, creating a legacy of hope and resilience far greater than any single individual. The story, for that community, was just beginning a new, brighter chapter. And so, a simple act of witnessing in a neighborhood grocery store, an unwillingness to turn a blind eye to injustice, blossomed into a powerful movement for change. Keanu Reeves, by choosing empathy over indifference, empowered a community to stand up against exploitation and reclaim their dignity. This story is a profound reminder that courage is contagious, and that one person, armed with compassion and a belief in what is right, can indeed spark a transformation that touches countless lives. It teaches us that the fight for justice, however daunting, begins with the decision to care and to act. What injustices in your own community move you? And how can you be a part of the story that changes things for the better? Share your thoughts with us, because every voice raised against unfairness, every hand extended in support, contributes to a brighter, more just world. Until next time on Beyond the Story, stay inspired, and never underestimate the power of your own compassion.